Well, thank you for being here. So to say this week was a productive week, I think would be an understatement. The House is moving quickly on a number of priorities we have to make progress for Minnesota's economy. Clearly, the biggest news was the passage yesterday of a $500 million middle-class tax cut. The tax bill sets our priorities where I think they should be, which is continuing to expand economic opportunity for middle-class Minnesotans and small businesses. And I do want to comment a little bit on the fact that this is the tax bill that we took up yesterday is entirely consistent, I think, with the priorities that we have been moving all along. If you remember our tax bill last year, we focused in on raising taxes in a fair way on the wealthiest 2% of Minnesotans and on closing corporate loopholes. That was the vast majority of the taxes we increased. And we used that money for middle-class tax relief, for property tax relief. And the news that came out this week that property taxes, particularly because of the direct property tax relief that we included in the bill last year, are going to be going down for the first time in a decade. That's clear middle-class tax relief. That's always been our priority. And in fact, the business-to-business taxes last year were put in place to provide additional property tax relief, to remove the sales tax on cities and counties and other local units of government. Again, direct property tax relief for Minnesota families. Because the economy has expanded, we now have the opportunity to move back on some of those business-to-business taxes while continuing to provide the property tax relief that they paid for in the past. And so we believe that the bill we passed yesterday is entirely consistent with the path that we've taken all along and our priority of growing Minnesota's economy from the middle out. There is obviously a sense of urgency to getting this done. The governor has set a March 14th deadline that I still think is entirely doable to move this tax bill forward, and I hope that can happen so we can get this relief out to middle-class Minnesotans and those businesses as quickly as possible. Governor Dayton unveiled his unsession legislative agenda this week, and we strongly support it and are already moving a number of bills through the House that are part of his package. And I anticipate some of those bills will be on the floor next week, although Aaron will get a little bit more into that. But in particular, for instance, Representative Swatsky's special ed paperwork bill had a very good hearing this past week and is continuing to move ahead. We also heard many bills that are part of another priority for us, the Women's Economic Security Act, and a number of those are continuing to move ahead. We think that continues to be a priority, again, entirely consistent with trying to grow our economy for middle-class Minnesotans. So I'm going to turn it with that over to Representative Murphy.
Thank you and good morning. I want to thank our members of the House for their continued diligent and swift work for the people of Minnesota. We've started at a quick pace and we anticipate we will continue at this pace until we're done in early May 19th, just to be clear. Next week, we'll have bills up on the floor authored by both Democrats and Republicans. We expect to take a vote on Representative Winkler's gift ban repeal. You'll recall last year there was a change in the gift ban law, and we're going to repeal that change, and Representative Winkler's got that moving through the House, and we'll take that up next week, we believe. And I expect we will start to see unsession bills moving their way through the House. We could see something up on the floor as early as next week dealing with higher ed, but those bills are in process and moving along. I'm also really proud and pleased with the work that Representative Seltzer is doing on the school lunch issue. That bill should also be up soon, and that's a priority we share, obviously, with the administration. It's my hope that we'll continue to see progress on the minimum wage. It's important that we give 350,000 Minnesotans a boost in their pay, and no one should work hard in a full-time job and earn a poverty wage. So from our perspective, it's very important that we continue to do that work, and we're full of optimism about our opportunity to get that done and get that done soon. And the same goes for middle-class tax cuts, and the Speaker spoke about those. We did pass a very focused and clean bill to get it over to the Senate in order to get it to the governor by his deadline of March 14th, and we think that's critical. I'm optimistic that we can continue to push these issues through the legislature and get those things onto the desk for the governor. We are making real progress for Minnesota, and we will continue. Thank you. And with that, Senator Sieben.
Well, good morning. These first 2 weeks have been so busy, it's easy to overlook the significant progress that we've made in the legislature so far for Minnesota. Thinking back to my previous sessions in the legislature, I remember year after year, the tone during the first few weeks was always about how we were going to deal with these massive deficits that the state was facing, talking about difficult cuts and delayed payments to schools. And this session has certainly been a refreshing change. Last Friday, we received the confirmation, as the speaker mentioned, that our economy continues to gain momentum, but we also found out that our property tax payments are shrinking for the first time in 12 years. For example, in Hastings, a city that I represent, they reduced their levy by 2.5%. Of course, there's always more work to be done, and the governor's supplemental budget announcement underscored that we have an opportunity this year to build on our momentum and position Minnesota for long-term growth and stability. So it's encouraging to see the conversation centered on priorities like tax relief and bolstering the budget reserves. These are priorities that we share as the Senate, and we look forward to working with the governor and our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to build on our progress and make smart decisions for Minnesota. Looking ahead to next week, we plan to take the state contract bill up on the floor on Monday that Senator Metzen is carrying, and we'll hold floor sessions on Wednesday and Thursday to keep bills quickly moving through the process. Committees will begin to review the governor's supplemental budget proposal, including bills on the reserve in Senator Cohen's Finance Committee. Additionally, there are many other policy issues that are advancing through the committee process that I know many of you have been covering. Things like online voter registration, Senator Eaton's bill on administering Narcan to overdose victims will be up in HHS. Senator Jensen's Insurance Fraud Prevention Act is up in Commerce. And then there are a lot of other bills that are really showcasing that our committees are really, really busy right now doing a lot of good work. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. Sorry.
Oh, we're close. So I just wanted to let you guys know it's been so busy. I put in 50,000 steps on my new Fitbit deal here. So that illustrates, I have my staff tally it up, that illustrates how busy we've been this week. I do want to thank Speaker Teese and Representative Murphy as we move through that important school lunch legislation that I have the pleasure to carry in the Senate. We think that is fantastic for low-income workers, or low-income people. In addition to that, I just wanted to add a little bit, since I'm a conferee on the minimum wage, that I think that though it's been appeared to be a little, testy, we don't think that is any different than what you normally do when you sit down and try to hash these things out. We have had productive conversations about the minimum wage. We have worked awfully hard in the Senate to build a coalition to get minimum wage to $9.50, and we think that that is kind of where it needs to be. Some of the details that come after are things that we're working through with my fellow conferees and leadership in the House, and we think that we're very, very optimistic that we're going to have a bill sooner than later. So I just wanted to make sure that we knew that we're together on this issue, and we're going to kind of figure it out sooner than later. So with that, I think we should take some questions.
Can I about that issue?
Yep.
What is it that makes you think you'll get a deal sooner than later? Are you hearing anything from your caucus that will accept any form of an inflator on minimum wage, or what is it that is leading to a compromise?
Well, I think that what we've done is that, we feel like in the Senate that, 950 was the really important number. It was the coalition. It's what we heard from our citizens. It's what we kind of heard from the broader community. And so we know that trying to figure out the inflator, what I think we have to do is figure out what the combination looks like. So today, at least on the record, we've just been able to kind of walk through and really kind of state our position. I won't begin to speak for the conferees in the House, But what we hoped is to kind of get through the first wave of saying what our positions are, what our caucus thinks, and then at that time take some time off, have some conversations, and then as we start to work through it next week, we're hoping that there could be something that could be done. So I don't want to draw any line in the sand other than to say that the Senate passed a bill last year at 775, and this year we offered 950, and so we think that's significant progress. I know the House has a version of kind of what they want to do, but I've had the pleasure to serve in both the House and the Senate the last 6 years, and so I got a lot of friends over there, and I think we can get it done.
You're saying there's a version of an inflator you may be able to accept.
Yeah, I just don't know. We haven't been offered an alternate, version other than kind of the variation of what the same is. So we haven't gotten to the creative side of this yet, but I look forward to do so.
Some of your critics on this whole issue are saying that they want to know which senators are the ones who don't support indexing or the inflator. How many are there?
I appreciate it. Well, we've had a lot of conversations with that. I don't think it's my place to kind of go out and speak for other senators. I know you guys are talking to them, and others are talking with people. And the situation is a little fluid, and we're in the middle of negotiations. So I don't want to say that this person or that person, because what we're doing is we're listening. We're taking in what the caucus kind of tells us. We're bringing that to the public in the form of the conference committee. We're taking the House's proposal, and I think they're doing the same thing, and then we're taking it back. And you may get some changing, right? You might get someone who says that they don't like the inflator but like 950, but then if we lower it and then we put the inflator in, that might change a dynamic. And so I wouldn't be prepared to answer that because the process is dynamic and fluid.
How do you know?
Well,
what the votes are?
we talked to senators about what the proposals are today, and I'm not prepared to tell you who the names of those senators are, but I think it would be disingenuous to do so because we're really working collaboratively to find what the best method is and what the best number is. Today, we in the Senate, clearly, we've said it publicly, we think that 950 without the inflator is the best. The House has said that we want 950 with the inflator, and I don't mean to speak for the House, but that's just what's been in the public, but we're working hard to see if we can find a solution.
Speaker Thiessen, why does your caucus feel an inflator is an essential element in this final compromise?
Well, I think that first of all, I think this is an issue that's best left to the conferees to work out at this point, and they seem at the conferee level to be making progress on it, and so I think from the perspective of folks that support the inflator, what it says is we're once we get to 950, and there's a slower phase in under the proposal right now over several years, that the next year and immediately thereafter, that minimum wage starts to lose its value. And we want to make sure that we are continuing to move Minnesotans to a place where they don't have to work 40 hours and live in poverty.
Did you just say you're not working with the conference committee? You're letting them do it and you're not having any involvement?
No, but I think at this point it's better to let the conferees work through these issues because they're the experts on it. Any other questions?
Leader Sieben, or
Are your
A week from Friday.
A week from Friday. Are your caucuses setting any priorities on policy bills that you have to get through? What's urgent on your agenda?
Well, I mean, so 2 weeks from today is the deadlines, yes. The same things that we've talked about. There's a number of bills that people are working on, and I think there's going to be a lot coming through the system. But the Women's Economic Security Act pieces are very important to our caucus, making sure that we're moving forward on some of our Greater Minnesota agenda, economic development ideas to continue to grow the economy all across the state is going to be very important to us. We're already working on a second tax bill to deal with things that aren't kind of these urgent matters that need to get signed immediately. But I would even hate to say that there's other things that aren't priorities for us not right now. But those are things that we've been kind of talking about and building up this session.
Leader Sieben, will the Senate meet the governor's March 14th deadline? That's a week from today on the tax bill.
I think that there's been a lot of discussion about how there's this conflict between the two bodies over the tax bill now. It's important to keep in mind that this is a very large proposal that the House passed, and the Senate hasn't said that we disagree with the content of the bill. The Senate does have pretty strong. I've heard pretty strongly from our tax committee chair that he wants to have hearings, hear from the public on all the different components that will go into it, and that will take some time. So I think it will be very difficult for us to have all of that occur by next week, but we do intend to move as judiciously and as quickly as possible.
What's the holdup, though? I mean, I haven't looked at the committee schedule yesterday, and there are no hearings scheduled on this, so, I mean, he's the tax committee chair, he can hold a hearing whenever he wants.
That's correct, and I think Senator Skoye does have an intention. He has said that he is going to hold those hearings as quickly as he can, as soon as possible, on his agenda. I think that he isn't trying to hold anything up. He's already heard, and Senator Rest has heard, provisions for tax relief in her division that are components of the larger bill that the House has passed. So again, I think they're moving as quickly as possible, keeping in mind that there is a process in the Senate, and we, like to think that we take our time on things and are careful about things. But again, want to emphasize that there is no public disagreement right now over any specific components of the bill that the House has passed.
If there's no conformity, if those conformity pieces that have a time element to them aren't passed in time, is the Senate prepared to take the blame for not letting people claim those things on their taxes for this year?
Well, the way that I understand it is that people will be able to file, they can file an extension if they don't meet that. We've been told by the department that it will take a couple weeks to develop the software that's necessary for any changes that are made. So it's unclear whether now, even if there was a scenario where we cut out public input and could pass a bill, extend the rules and declare an emergency and pass the bill, whether that would even be able to happen. The marriage penalty that's been talked about a lot is not for the 2013 tax year, it's for 2014. So that isn't quite as pressing, I think, as it's been
A different
portrayed.
message from the department, because they've told us publicly that they've already started this conversation with the software preparers and everything, and they think that they could turn some of these things around in time if the bill is passed by mid-month. What message have you got?
What I've heard is having a conversation with Senator Skoye, so perhaps you could talk to him too about more details. But he indicated to me that in conversations he's had, that he anticipates that software development will take a couple of weeks. So certainly that wouldn't meet the next week deadline that you referenced earlier.
So is it the plan for the Senate to move much quicker on these reserve bills than any tax bills?
No, I don't think that is an overall strategy. Senator Cohen's bill on the reserves is coming up in his finance committee next week. But as I said, Senator Skoye has already heard provisions of the House tax bill and will continue to look at that bill and move as quickly as possible. So the intent is that both things will move forward as quickly as possible.
Senator, I'm confused here. You're saying that the strategy or the solution to this issue, even though taxpayers, and I've talked to some of them, are saying they're worried about thousands of dollars being on the line, is, well, just wait and we'll file an amended return maybe. At some point, maybe you can file an amended return, go back to the accountant and spend another $80 or $100 as opposed to passing it in a week or two?
Look, I mean, I think that we're talking about a very large amount of money here, and so we want to be careful in the Senate. That's all that we're saying. We're not saying that we're against it. We're not saying that Minnesotans won't receive this tax relief in the end. We just want an opportunity for the public to weigh in and for our committees, Senator Skoye and Senator Rest, to lead their committees to have very careful and detailed discussions as quickly as possible about the tax bill. And that's all we're saying.
You say you want the public to have an opportunity to weigh in, but have you heard anyone in the public oppose tax cuts?
I think that when we think over the past decade, how we have been in a cycle of continual budget deficits, how we've had to borrow from our schools, it's important that we keep these things in mind before we, it's important just to have a discussion about when we send tax cuts, if we're spending taxpayer money, it's important to have the opportunity for the public to weigh in, and that process will take place in the tax committee.
Question for the speaker and either Senator Stevens or Senator Hayden, whoever wants to take it. But on medical marijuana bill, do you expect that to move forward in its current form? And if not, what changes are needed?
Well, I think there was a powerful hearing in the Health and Human Services Committee this last week about individuals expressing the impact that this could have on their lives. What I want to get to, though, is a bill that both law enforcement and the advocates of medical marijuana can support. And until we get that bill, I don't see a bill passing off the House floor.
Do you have a view of what that would look like?
Well, we've been sitting down with law enforcement folks and the advocates a number of times, and there has been some progress and movement together. It wouldn't be as broad, quite obviously, as the bill that got its hearing last week in the committee. But I think we are making progress, and we'll continue to work at that.
Yeah, I think the speaker hit the nail on the head that I don't know. I sit in Health and Human Service. I haven't seen it scheduled yet, but I think that part of the process is it got heard in the House, and now the negotiations are on to see if we can get law enforcement involved. The governor's been pretty clear from the very beginning that he wasn't going to sign a bill that law enforcement didn't approve, and so I think that those negotiations are ongoing, and I haven't seen it the hearing set in the Senate yet.
Did you say that the gift ban thing is next week? Did you say which day? Do you know which day?
I did, and I believe it'll be on Thursday. You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.